Around our house, I've determined that we mostly are pyros. I mean, there's something about, man, we love to just burn stuff. It comes from, really, my mom, southeastern Kentucky. There's something about burning stuff when you're from Kentucky. Cardinal fans don't get this, but man, if we're happy, we're going to burn something. So if we're at your house and UK's playing and they win, your couch is in danger. We might, if we show up with a lighter at your house, you know it's about to be a good game. We're going to light something. And we're likely to take your couch right out in the backyard and just light that thing right up. But I'm just from a long line of pyros, people that like to burn stuff and watch stuff and gather around fires. And there's something about a campfire that's real inviting, and you get out there and you just love that and make s'mores or even just warm your hands and your buns. And it's just nice, you know. It's just inviting and powerful. And at Phos, the word Phos means light, and in the logo for us, the lantern, the flame is really important because that sort of flame invites people and it guides us on our path and it helps us know where we're going. And so flames and fires can be so inviting and so cool, and they can also be devastating, like what's going on out west right now with the fires out there, like what we suffered here in the United States on 9/11. A lot of years ago, many of you may have seen the memorial opened up, the museum opened up in New York, and pretty poignant to see President Obama standing beside that giant piece of rubble that had the fire departments and all. We as Americans were tried by fire in a very real way that day. And so fires can just be devastating. And the idea of trial by fire is an ancient idea that sometimes something or someone would be proved true or false based on how they stood in the face of the flames and what they would do. I hope that you're never tried by fire, but you might be. A young lady in another part of the world is going through an incredible ordeal right now. Her name is Miriam Yiya Ibrahim Ishag. Now, obviously a different culture. And here's the story. A Muslim judge in Sudan has ordered the flogging and execution of a pregnant Christian woman after she refused to convert to Islam. Wow. What would you do if you were her? If you were there and you're fully pregnant, she's near term, and you're facing this trial by fire, you're facing this idea that if you don't change what you believe, if you won't bow down to the gods we say are true, you will die. What would you do? How would you stand, or how would you fall? Would you bow to another culture and another god, or would you stand for what you believe is truly right? You know, we face that sort of thing in life and in sports and at school all the time. Maybe not to that magnitude. Rarely are we put in front of a judge and said to recant our faith in Jesus. That's just not happening here in the U.S. However, some of your coworkers might want you to recant your faith in Jesus. They really don't want you to believe that or to say that or to be that. Your boss might want you not to do that. Your coach certainly may not want you to be a Christ follower. And some of your teachers are adamantly opposed to the notion that you would be a Jesus follower. Now, I want to go ahead and warn you, today's message is for people who follow Jesus Christ. So if that's you, this is your message. If you're not yet part of that, and you're not sure you even want to be a part of it, today's message might push you further away. You might decide, man, I do not want to be a Christ follower. I'm just going to stand on the outside and watch the other people burn, because I ain't going there. You'll have to choose. I don't know which way you'll go. I don't know if you'll step closer to Jesus or if you'll step back and think again. It's okay to step back and think again, because Jesus said you should count the cost of following him. And although we always say he invites everybody, he does. But many people really won't respond to his call and really follow. You'll have to choose what you're going to do. It's up to you. We'll love you either way, and you can hang out with us and continue to come around. But you'll have to. This is a message for your heart to let sink in, and to let it work on you. And to set this story up, I'm going to use an ancient story. It's a story that happened 600 years before Jesus was here. It's a story that happened 600 miles to the west of Jerusalem. It's a story about a king who had gone mad. It's a story about the Israelites being hauled into captivity. Many of the Israelites were killed when this king and his hordes swept into their country, into the city of Jerusalem in particular, and ransacked that city and took all the gold out of God's temple, took all the valuables out of the city, and hauled them 600 miles away back to their king. The king's name is Nebuchadnezzar, and the city is Babylon. And what's going on is that there are young people that have been recruited, that's the wrong word, have been procured from Jerusalem. They're the best and brightest of Jerusalem, had been brought to serve in Nebuchadnezzar's courts and to learn the ways of the Babylonians, and then to represent kind of a bridge between the Babylonian culture and the culture of Israel. Because they would understand both cultures, and they could help lead those territories that were far flung away from this king Nebuchadnezzar. He needed different people trained to oversee different parts of his kingdom. So that's the setup for the story I want to share with you today. It's a story about three courageous young God followers. Jesus hadn't arrived on the scene yet, so they were God followers. They were people that believed in one true God, and that you should only bow to one God, the one true God. You should never bow to another idol or another god. That you should only worship this one true God. This is what they believed in their heart. And even though they had been hauled away 600 miles and they were living under the rule of a powerful king, Nebuchadnezzar, in their heart of hearts, they just would not worship anybody other than the one true God. How about you? Will you worship anybody else but the one true God? We'll find out today. You'll have to listen to God speaking to you and ask, God, am I bowing down to any other God but you? Am I serving any other God but you? Do I trust you more than I trust any of the other idols and gods in my life? You'll have to determine that yourself. I can't determine it, but inside your heart, you'll have to pick up the story and go from there. So, it's Daniel 3:1. That's where I'm going. Picking up the book of Daniel, chapter 3. These three young men, well, you hear their names in a minute. It's interesting. Verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, let's talk about this king for a minute. Nebuchadnezzar was obviously powerful. He was powerful. He ruled a vast region that had been incredibly effective in military conquest. He was overseeing millions of people's lives, and he had them by the throat. And as that power kind of went to his head, he got on this power trip. And so he has this gold statue thing made that's 60 cubits. A cubit is about 18 inches. So how high is this thing? 90 feet. 90 feet. Now, there's a little house over here on top of a silo. I really don't know why, but there is a little red house on the silo over here. How tall is that? What's your guess? Don't understand. 38 feet? Is that all?
He said it was 4 ladders to get inside of it in the article.
Really? Okay, 4 ladders. So 38 feet? Wow, something like that. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how tall it is. If one of you go measure it, let me know. But here's what you have to imagine. Out in the middle of this plain, this probably deserty kind of space, there is this statue that's erected that's probably twice as tall as that. Can you imagine? You could see it from a long way off. And this out-of-control Nebuchadnezzar king guy has set up this statue. What's the statue a reminder of? Of his power, of his presence, that he owns you in every way imaginable, that there is no one as powerful as him. He is his own God. He is his own idol. Now, we're not sure what this statue looked like. Some scholars believe it was a kind of an image of Nebuchadnezzar himself. Others think maybe it was a statue to little g gods, to idols of some sort. We're not clearly told, but 90 feet tall, 6 feet wide, it was huge. and it was present, and it was powerful, and it represented the most powerful man on the planet at that point in history. So he set up this statue of the plain of Dura, verse 2. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So he gathered all the dignitaries, all the people that oversaw all of his far-flung territories. They all were in Babylon for the big event out on the plain of Dura. And they all stood before this 90-foot statue, and these represented people from all over his conquered territory. All different kinds of languages and all different kinds of cultures and religions were gathered under the shadow of this one giant statue. Get the picture? See where we are? Then the herald loudly proclaimed, and I'm imagining now almost the trumpets going up, bum, 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 and then the guy opens the scroll and he begins to read. This is how it works. Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you're commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. And it probably echoed through. Blazing furnace, 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 furnace. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So hundreds, perhaps thousands of people were gathered there on the plain of Dura under the shadow of this 90-foot statue, this gold statue. By the way, some of that gold that was in that statue, no doubt, came from the house of God in Jerusalem, 600 miles away. Nebuchadnezzar defied God. He set himself up as God. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever." This is good stuff. This is buttering up the king. Okay. "May you live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you've set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you. Your majesty, they never serve your gods, and they don't worship the image of gold that you've set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I've set up? Now when you hear the sound of the flute, horn, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I've made for you, very good. I want to give you one more chance. One more chance. And you better get it right this time." Those three young men standing before the most powerful person on the planet, who could indeed carry out his promise to burn them in the fire, to throw them into the furnace. It would be a good idea for you to bow down right now. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Then what God? What God? Who's going to rescue you now? What God can save you from me? Because I'm way more powerful than anything in your life. I own you in every way. I have you right where I want you, and there's nothing you can do about it. You are powerless in my presence. And if you don't do what I say you should do, you will burn. What is it in your life that demands that kind of allegiance? Or who is it? Who is it that has so much power in your life that they could make you bow down and make you violate maybe even your own sense of what it is to follow Jesus? Who or what would you bow down to if that boss stood before you? If that coach threatens to bench you if you don't show up at a practice, maybe during Sunday morning? And what if that teacher threatens to give you a poor grade, maybe even fail you for the class if you won't renounce your faith? This is happening in our schools. There are teachers that defy our God. And they will demand of students that they recant their faith some way. You guys that are sophomores, juniors, seniors, listen to me. In a year or so, you're going to head off to college. And the smarter you are, the more you're going to deal with elite professors, Keegan Curry, who are going to challenge your faith. And their job is going to be to try to take your faith. I'm not just calling you out, but I'm calling out your class. And I'm telling you guys this. When you head to college, there are professors there whose mission in life is to take your faith away from you and to tell you to renounce your faith some way, somehow. And to have you bow down to a different God and a different idol. And they will do everything in their power to dissuade you and to put pressure on you and to tell you if you don't write the paper with a certain slant and renounce your faith, you'll suffer. And it even happens in our high schools. It's coming to a school near you. It might be a coach or a sports program that demands ultimate allegiance. I see it happen all the time. I see people get started in their faith journey of following Jesus, and they're excited and they're connected, and then their young person makes the sports team. And the sports team demands allegiance and demands weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend of travel and of bowing down to the little g god of that sport and the powerful person, the coach, who can bench you or force you off the team. And you must choose. Because the pattern is this. The sport begins to dominate, takes over. The family moves, is not connected here, and then I hear this kind of refrain. Well, my son doesn't feel very connected at church. Well, no duh. Hello? Who are you bowing down to? Who do you serve? Who owns you? Who owns your family? Do you own them? Are you serving God? Is it for you that your family will serve God, or will you serve another little g god? And it's coming to a sport near you. It's coming to a band program near you. I promise you, coaches, band directors, they get out of control just like Nebuchadnezzar. And they rise up and they set up statues that you have to bow down to. Now, I'm not saying you should never miss worship to do something. I'm just saying, I think you have to do an honest gut check and say, who owns me? Who owns my family? Who do I bow down to? Do a priority check. I'm not going to do it. You do it yourself. Look at your time. Look at your talent. Look at your treasure, your checkbook. And you can determine who owns you. You can determine who you bow down to. You can determine who you think your God is by your priorities. I'm not going to tell you who you bow down to. You must choose, and you must look yourself and figure it out for yourself. Because there's all kinds of things in our culture that want us to bow down. Chloe Arvin, sitting in worship today, she's supposed to be at a tennis tournament. Started at 10 o'clock this morning. Mike and Lisa simply said she's not going to be there. I talk about my sons a lot. You know that I love them and I'm proud of them. They're both good athletes. But there are moments when we've had to choose. There's tournaments we've had to say, no, we're not going to be there. And we've not been threatened with expulsion from the team yet. We're not at that level, but it might come in the years ahead. But this is my prayer. When we gently, quietly just say, guys, we're not going to be at this or that, or we're not coming to that practice or that game or that tournament. This is my prayer, and maybe you could say one like this for your kids. God, would you make my kids so great at this sport that there's nothing the coach can do except for to play them? That's it. You can pray that prayer if you want to. Pray, God, just let them be so good that no matter what the coach says, the coach is going to be an idiot if they don't play them. Okay? And that's the way around it. Do you trust God more than you trust the coach? Do you trust God, young person, to write the paper the way you know you need to write it in honor of your faith, or do you trust the teacher more than God? At work this week, will you compromise in an area you know you shouldn't compromise on? Or will you trust God more than you trust the compromise and more than you trust your boss or the person that strokes the signature on your paycheck? Who do you trust more? You'll have to decide. For some of you in your marriage right now, you're facing a serious challenge. And the culture will say to you, it's just not worth all that work, and it's too hard, and really it's just a piece of paper, so just toss it aside. It doesn't matter. The kids will be all right. It's not a big deal. It's a lie, guys. Don't buy it. It's not true. Choose who you will serve. Choose who you will bow down to. And if you'll bow down to our God, to the one true God, and follow his ways and trust him more than anything else, you can see what God can do. And by the way, there's no guarantee that Chloe won't pay a price for being here today. There's no guarantee. You don't have guarantees when you take this sort of stand. This young lady, this young pregnant lady I mentioned at the beginning of this message, no guarantees. If she stands faithful to God, she might die. Let's go back to the story. What God is going to be able to rescue you from my hand? And this is the threat of people in power in your life. What God's going to save you from me because I got you where I want you. I own you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. That sounds like faith, doesn't it? We aren't bowing. We're not giving up. And you can put us in the furnace, and our God can deliver us. And that seems like faith. And it is the beginning of faith. And you could stand in whatever way you need to, and you could gently, quietly, powerfully just simply say, I trust God more than my circumstance. I trust God more than I trust you. And this isn't something you have to be braggadocious about, guys. Just simply be a Christ follower who refuses to bow to things you know that don't represent God, or to people that you know don't represent God. I'll give you another example. Mike reminded me of this between worship services. Back when I was a youth minister, I guess she's your cousin, Krista Miracle, was an amazing student. She was on our leadership team at the church where I was a youth minister. And she was a singer for us on our Wednesday night band. She was really excellent. She was also very talented in drama. She had been chosen to be lead at a major drama production at her school. But it was going to require for her to practice during our worship time on Wednesday nights with the young people. And she went quietly and humbly to the director, to the teacher. She said, here's the deal. You said, I have a commitment to God that I would serve on this worship team. And I'm going to keep that commitment. So if you need to remove me from the play, then so be it. I'm okay. Who was it? What play was it? It was The Sound of Music, and she was the lead. Who's the lead? Maria? Maria, okay. She had the lead part. She had it wrapped up, but she took this risk. She was promptly cut from the drama team. No, she wasn't. You know what happened? You know what happened? She quietly stood her ground as a young person, and the director changed the rehearsal times. How about that? You see, yeah, give it up. That's good. If there were more of us as Christ followers who would quietly, simply, powerfully trust God more than we trust culture, and quietly, simply, powerfully stand our ground and say, we will not bow to that, we will not bend to that, and you can burn us if you want to, but we're still going to stand right here, we could turn some things around. But it's going to take that, guys. We can't afford to give up any more ground than we've given up. And I'm not saying we have to be militant or mean or anything. I'm just saying, just be a Christ follower who follows him and trusts him more than anything else. At your work, at your school, in your sports program. And we can begin to change things. It won't always be easy, though. So what God's going to serve you, what God will save you, we don't need to give you an answer because our God is able to deliver us. Verse 18, this is powerful. This is faith. But even if he does not save us, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. We will not, even if he doesn't save us. Is that the kind of faith you have, or the kind of faith you would like to have? We're in the series called Unstoppable, and it's about how to have a faith in God that will propel you through life and make a difference in your life and in the lives of other people, no matter what your circumstances are. You see, the circumstance for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was hopeless, and they were powerless in the face of this all-powerful person, and yet they stood their ground. Even if he doesn't save us, we will not bow to you. I'm praying that your attitude would be that kind of attitude about things you face in your life. Even if you burn us, even if he doesn't deliver us, we will still stand here. Christ followers, that's what it means to follow Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus exhibited this same kind of faith in God. The night before Jesus was going to die on a cross, he knew it was coming. His death was imminent. He was going to be thrown into the grips of the most powerful people on his place on the planet at that point. And they would crush him and they would kill him. It would be horrific. And he knew it. And he prayed to God, God, if there's any other way, would you take this away from me? Yet, not my will, but your will. And as you know, he was crushed and he was crucified. But it brought glory to God, and it changed the entire planet because he would not cave in at that moment. Isn't that cool? So same way that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are standing there. We're not going to bow down to your worship, to worship this image. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. Some versions say his face changed. He got this evil, horrific face. And he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Would you still trust God at that moment? Would you still trust him? If the teacher's still breathing threats about the bad grade you're going to get if you don't submit, and if you continue to write about your faith in God, they're going to dock your grade, or maybe even fail you in the course. Would you still be there? If the coach says to you, You got to be at practice on Sunday morning, or I'm going to bench you. Would you go to the bench? If your boss says, if you don't go along with this policy that you know is blatantly wrong, would you take the cut? Would you take the hit? Or would you submit to your boss? You'll have to choose. So they are firmly in the fire. They are bound and thrown into the fire. The king's men who threw them in die because the furnace is so hot. Then Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around, and the 4th is like a son of the gods." We're never really told who it was, but I have a sneaking suspicion we know. That perhaps Jesus himself was in the middle of that trial with them. But there were still no guarantees. You see, Jesus will be with you when you face the trial. When you face a trial by fire, he will be with you. There will be a 4th man in the furnace with you. But there's still no guarantees how it's going to work out, is there? You might burn. You might not. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. God completely delivered them. Put a little bubble around them, as it were. Not even the smell of smoke. You ever been around a campfire for just an hour or two, and you come in, you're like, dude, you're going to stink for days. No smell of smoke on these guys. It's simply amazing. Verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." You see, in our culture today, at your work, at your school, on your sports team, if you will be the minority that will stand with God, you'll become the majority that makes a difference for him because of the power of Jesus Christ. The 4th man in the furnace will be with you. And for us as Christ followers, this is vital, that we begin to quietly, powerfully, simply take our stand and allow Christ to be the 4th man in our furnace, whatever we're facing. And that's how things will get done. That's how they'll get changed. And that's how culture can be pointed back to God. A few verses before, Nebuchadnezzar says, "What God? What God can save you?" And now he's saying, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." That's a big turnaround, isn't it? You can see the same kind of miracles happen in your life if you'll stand. And then he goes on. "Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble." This is a violent king, by the way. "For no other God can save in this way." No other God can save in this way. He went from what God to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and even says about him, no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Pretty powerful, huh? Will you burn? Will you bow? Will you bend? I don't know. You have to choose.